Well, currently my GP does something that's really useful. They know that I have panic attacks and I have low level anxiety and I struggle with getting to the surgery because of that. So they arrange phone appointments with me, which is really useful, and it means that I can speak to them in the comfort of my own home. Because I have panic attacks, I find it really difficult to get to my GP surgery, let alone be in the waiting area, because I don't like seeing unknown faces when I'm going through a difficult time. I feel paranoid. So for me, what would be useful is to have a room perhaps where I could sit on my own and know that I'm safe and the only person I'm going to see is my GP. I think having reasonable adjustments made, like the ones I've talked about, having a space to wait for my GP for that appointment, that would give me a lot more self-confidence in being able to get to the surgery. I'd know that none of the risk factors that set off my panic attacks would be there. So I feel a lot more comfortable about getting there in the first place.
When I was first in crisis, what was really useful to me was not feeling that I was under any sort of time restraint. To try and explain how you feel when you're having a mental health problem is really difficult. You muddle things up, you get confused, it's not always easy to know where to start. So it was really useful to me to feel that I wasn't sort of limited to how much time I had to explain how I felt. I always try and book a double appointment, and sometimes that isn't enough time. So to have the flexibility to have extra time if necessary is really helpful. I think visiting the GP for somebody who's got depression and anxiety like I have is stressful enough in itself. And if you feel that the GP's done a little bit of homework or has some background knowledge on you, then you're not having to retell your story over and over again, because that's difficult to keep going back over things.
I needed an emergency appointment after a weekend when I'd not slept very well, and I was becoming quite worried that I was having a relapse of mania. And my crisis team had asked me to book an emergency appointment on Monday morning, and that needed to be done at 8 a.m. Because that's the policy of the practice. 8 a.m. in the morning for me is just a really busy time. I've got to get the kids into breakfast club, and I didn't really want to talk about it in front of them, so it was quite difficult for me to made me feel very nervous that I perhaps wasn't going to get an appointment and get medication as soon as I needed it. I think I would have found it really helpful just to have some flexibility in how an emergency appointment could be booked. Ideally for me, online would have been perfect, because I could have done it straight away as soon as the crisis team had asked me to. Failing that, maybe just to be able to leave a message on an answer machine would have been great. It has felt to me that emergency appointments are kind of quite closely guarded, and I've had to give away quite a lot of information, probably more than I would like to have said, about my mental health history, and then it can sort of make you feel as if you're digging a hole for yourself, where the more emotional you get about needing the appointment, the more you feel that you're perhaps being perceived as somebody who's going to be problematic and the person wants to get you off the phone. I think one of the really important things is probably to have mental health training for kind of all staff involved in the practice, but particularly for reception staff and those staff on the phone, just so that they have more insight into what it actually feels like to be trying to call for an emergency appointment when you're already worried about becoming unwell.
My brother has seasonal affective disorder and was recently diagnosed with diabetes. As a consequence of the seasonal affective disorder, he just hibernates over the autumn winter months, and he wasn't getting his diabetes checked over those periods of time, and as a consequence it got worse. The nurse in his practice was fantastic. She made the effort on her own initiative to go and get some training to understand seasonal affective disorder and how she could actually make sure that she supported my brother in coming to appointments. They now have an arrangement where she texts him because he just ignores letters, and because she made the effort for him, he now makes the effort for her, and I'm really pleased to say actually his diabetes is now well managed, and he feels really supported by his practice.